Good evening, everyone. I'm Parveen Yaqub. I'm Deputy Vice-Chancellor of this university. Actually, I'm going to expand on that. I'm the first ever female Deputy Vice-Chancellor. If there was ever a day to totally milk it, this is it, isn't it? So I'm delighted to welcome you to the annual Edith Morley Lecture. We hold this lecture every year to mark International Women's Day and also to commemorate Edith Morley, who was the first female professor in the UK, appointed here at Reading in 1908, 10 years before women got the vote. And what's really remarkable about Edith's story is that we knew nothing about it until about 10 years ago when we uncovered unpublished memoirs and her personal papers in our archives. But ever since then, we've been extremely proud to share with the world what we've learned about this formidable and forward-thinking feminist, who was as passionate about the students that she taught as the causes that she campaigned for. Now, she was also a keen sportswoman. She played hockey and she had an interest in cycling. And they might seem like perfectly normal hobbies nowadays, but we need to put those in the context of a different time. So in 1900, women were allowed to participate at the Olympic Games for the first time, but only 22 women took part. That was 2.2% of all competitors and only 5 sports. In 1908, hockey was included in the Olympic Games for the first time, but only for men. So what year do you think women's hockey was introduced into the Olympic Games? And Rachel, you can't say because I told you the answer. What year do you think? Shout out. So 1908. 1988. 1950s. 48. 48. It's actually 1980. So 70 years after men's hockey was introduced into the Olympic Games. So what about women's football? Well, women's football started to develop towards the end of the 1800s, and there were a number of clubs up and down the country which admitted women. However, in 1921, the Football Association banned women from playing on Football League grounds, declaring, and I quote, "The game of football is quite unsuitable for females and ought not to be encouraged." It would be another 50 years before this view changed, and the ban was lifted in 1971. Edith Morley passed away in 1964 before many significant developments in women's sport had taken place, but it's entirely appropriate that tonight's tribute to Edith Morley, on the one hand, celebrates how far we've come, but on the other, debates the inequality that still remains in women's sport. So joining me on tonight's panel debate are 4 inspiring women. Kath Bishop, a University of Reading PhD graduate and British rowing legend. She competed at 3 Olympic Games, winning a silver medal in 2004 in partnership with Catherine Granger. Somehow, in parallel, she also managed to fit in a highly successful career as a diplomat in the Foreign Office, and now she works in leadership development as a consultant, speaker and writer. So I'd like to introduce Kath Bishop to the stage. Next, I'd like to introduce Alice Kirkup, a 4th-year student here at Reading. Alice is studying French and International Relations, and last year she spent the year in Lyon, in France. She joined the University Netball Club in her first year and very quickly made the first team, subsequently being voted Vice President in 2017. And she also plays mixed hockey for the university and is a regular gym goer. So please welcome Alice Kirkup. Next, we have Farah Williams, an English footballer who plays as a central midfielder for both Reading and England. Farah is considered one of England's leading female players, and with 170 caps playing for the England's women's team, she's the most capped English player of all time. Not bad, considering football is quite unsuitable for females. Farah was named Football Association's Young Player of the Year in 2002. the Players Player of the Year in 2009, and International Player of the Year in both 2007 and 2009. Please welcome Farrah Williams. And finally, I'd like to introduce Kelly Chambers, who's been the heart and soul of Reading FC Women for over a decade, having previously captained the side. She currently holds the title of Director of Women and Girls Football at Reading FC, as well as First Team Manager of Reading FC Women, and she's taken the team from strength to strength since joining in 2012. Please welcome Kelly Chambers. Welcome and thank you all for being here. So this is how this evening's going to work. I'm going to ask our panellists to reflect on some of the highs and lows of being leading sportswomen. But there will be plenty of time for questions from the floor. I'm hoping to stop about halfway for questions and then again at the end. And there'll be a couple of roving mics available. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand when the time comes and one of the members of the team will come to you. So I'm now going to go and join the panel. So, to get us started, I want to ask Farrah, can you tell me what made you realise that you wanted a career in sport and how did it all start?
It started very young, in primary school. I probably didn't realise I wanted a career in sport. I'm talking, I'm quite old now, so back then, women's football especially wasn't visible for me, so I just enjoyed playing it. I had brothers and sisters that played with me. I lived on the estate, so that was the thing to do. I probably didn't realise I was going to get a career in football until I was 30. That's when I became professional. Yeah, so I just used to play it because it was something that I loved doing, something that I was really passionate about. Yeah, I finally got a career at the age of 30 in terms of a paid career. Before that, I was working and paying to play. So yeah, it was pretty much a hobby for most of my life until the age of 30. So.
And what was it at the age of 30 that changed it from a hobby into something that you were really serious about doing professionally?
I think I was professional in what I did, even though it was a hobby. So in terms of my training program and representing England during that time, I just knew it wasn't a career in terms of a paid career where I could just solely concentrate on that. I had to work to enable myself to have families to be able to go and train, etc. So it was at 30 that England introduced a pay system, so I was paid to play England, and then the clubs were part-time, so I had a part-time salary, so combined was enough for me to, quit a job that I had and get solely focused on football.
Thank you. Kath, what inspired you to become a rower?
It really wasn't intentional. I had a very sort of disastrous school sport experience, and actually, not really encouraged. I was sort of tall, a bit uncoordinated, and sort of labelled as not very sporty, and I felt very confident about sport. So it was really only by chance at university, against my better intentions, someone said, "Why don't you have a go?" And initially, actually, I was like, I don't want to, I'm going to be awful, and I'll look really silly, and it looks really full on and quite hard work, and not getting up early in the morning, and none of that is what, I'm thinking university is about. But anyway, after a lot of persuasion as well, I gave it a go, and actually, it kind of totally transformed my experience of sport. I fell in love with the sport. I had no aspirations to kind of end up doing it, 6 hours a day as I did sort of, 5 years later. But I just fell in love with sport, being on the river, and actually an incredible community of people, just everyone who loved rowing and coached rowing and helped us and tailored, trained boats to regattas and all of that. Just being part of that community was just, huge fun, and also a kind of way of learning about myself and stretching myself and actually being tall and slightly coordinated. Was working in a boat for me, so.
And what do you think got you from falling in love with the sport to actually being an Olympic rower?
Great coaches in that kind of early university, early university years, having amazing volunteer coaches who went out of their way to get equipment, because the university women's team didn't have equipment, the university men's team did, but incredible volunteers who sort of literally kept us afloat, and she sort of imbued that love of the sport, and also gave me a great technical founding, and sort of said, you know, it's possible you could go to the Olympics, what do you think? And you know, and when someone puts that in your head, then you know, you've got to find out.
So it sounds like coaches are a really important influence. Is that your experience, Karen?
Yeah, I've had some really great coaches for many different reasons and different things that they brought to me as a person. You know, some that were very good in terms of their detail, in terms of what I needed to be a better footballer, but actually some in terms of my life skills and how they, you know, make me be a better person and understand myself a little bit better. So yeah, I mean, the volunteer coaches that you mentioned, they're irreplaceable. They're the ones that go over and above at times, you know, even when they have their own things going on in life, just to make sure that you're in a better position so that you can do what you do so well. So yeah, they're irreplaceable. Volunteers are irreplaceable, and they're the people, the coaches that come out and give you the platform to just to play. Some of them were just a volunteer, just, you know, were there so that you was able to have football gigs, for example, and codes to put down so that you could play. It wasn't even about the detail that you got.
And I guess role models are also important. Alice, did you have any role models in sport when you were growing up?
Yeah, I'd say primarily my mother. She was a PT of 23 years, so kind of back when it wasn't as popular to get into maybe PT, and has now gone on to life coaching and things. But I think because there wasn't or isn't such a representation on TV for women in sport, that we're kind of forced to look a bit closer to home. I think she's kind of drilled that in me from the start, especially with sport, the determination and everything that comes from PT.
And is a PT personal trainer?
Yes, exactly.
And you can with that.
Well, in the sport itself, there wasn't really any role models that I kind of looked up to. I think more so was my family. Like I'm very much someone who's based up on hard work and making sure that I do everything I can to make the people around me succeed, and put all my energy and all my time to doing that. And obviously, I think I've shown that in my time at Reading, to going from no women's team to sort of very amateur set up to where we are now as a professional outfit, and not just the first team, but going from the first team all the way down, if you like, to our roots and what we want to bring through. So, but yeah, that was my family upbringing. My mum was very hard working. My dad was always out working, didn't get to see him much, and it was a case of we had to work hard to get what we wanted to get, and have a life that we had growing up. And so yeah, she was a role model for me, and but in the sport itself, it was, you were looking at probably males that were in the game, managers, players at the time, obviously when I was playing. But yeah, it was family more than anything that would push me to do more, but also for them to inspire me and wanting to do more as well.
And I guess we see the successful sports people as the ones that are the most visible, but success means different things to different people, doesn't it? So, Clara, what would you say success means to you?
For me, my success is in football. I don't ever look at football and see it as whether I win trophies as an individual or as a team. They're not success. I've never measured success based on my achievements in sport. For me, you know, just enjoying what I do every day, to be able to go in and play every day and enjoy it. That's success, knowing that my mum is proud of what I do, and I know she's at home happy and quite content with that. Brothers and sisters are quite comfortable. I don't have worries in life thinking, you know, are they okay? They were my priorities, you know, as a kid, and certainly the upbringing that I had was always to be able to support my mum. I'm in a position now that I can, and if ever needed, not that she does need me, that I would be able to. And so that's how I measure my success as a person, more than sport. Sport was a hobby throughout, so yeah.
And Kath, you've written about success. What's your view on what success means?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on a real sort of journey on this, and yeah, I'm in the process of finishing a book even about it, so I've been quite obsessed by this question about what does success mean. I think partly, you know, when I kind of came into the Olympic team, I saw that kind of changeover when the lottery funding came in and our ambitions changed. And I think there was a sort of, you know, there's huge positivity to believing, you know, we can achieve more with good support. But then I saw that become a bit of an obsession with, you know, it only counts if you win, and if you don't win, you're a failure, and win at all costs. And I could see, you know, cultures developing around that was actually killing that sense of what really matters and the perspective, and really having a sense of, you know, priorities in a way that sort of Farah was setting out there. And I think, you know, I kind of was guilty of being really trapped into that, and I stopped enjoying the sport as well. There was a sense of, you know, if I don't win, you know, in my second Olympics, I had a really poor performance for a whole host of reasons. And I felt just utterly destroyed. I felt that, you know, as a person, my worth was less because I came ninth at the Olympics. And I put so much into that, and everything in that environment had made me also put so much into that, and it was really devastating. And it's, you know, it can't be right, you know, the speed I make a boat go backwards on a lake. That can't be justifying my work as a human being, you know? How could I have lost that much perspective? And so, you know, and I think we're seeing that shift now. We're seeing a lot of mental health stories coming out where if you haven't won, you're destroyed because you're a failure. But actually, if you have won, you're pretty miserable too, because of the experience you've had, or, you know, because of the fact that you haven't tied it to the rest of your life. So, you know, success is about a moment crossing a line, and people walk into the Olympic Village, you know, with medals saying, you know, I'm feeling depressed, or is that it? So success has to be a much broader concept, a much longer term concept that has a meaning for the rest of your life, the sport that won't go on forever. And there's some great stories of people in races who come second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, but we don't hear those. And they've got just as much that we can learn from and enjoy. That race won't happen without everyone in it. And everyone's tried hard, and everyone's tried to, you know, do something differently, bring their own strengths. You know, it sort of frustrates me sometimes that, you know, we just hear about the people who win or people who've got a medal, and I think we miss out on a lot more.
It's really good advice for the younger people who are hoping to pursue careers or otherwise in sport.
I mean, sports psychology has really shifted in the last sort of 15, 20 years from, you know, I can remember the first psychologist that I saw just said, have you got the will to win? How much do you want to win? I thought, I think I want to win quite a lot, but how do I know? You know, it's like, oh, maybe I don't want to win as much as but how much does everyone know? You know, and all the time I was thinking that, I'm not getting any faster. And it was, you know, that was a lot of the sort of, let's be all macho about, you know, now we're winners, you know, we're not going to be plucky losers anymore. And actually, that didn't help anybody. And, you know, athletes now focus on the process, the things they can control. You know, the result will sort itself out, and the result is dependent on a whole lot of external things, you know, referee decisions in football, and, you know, all sorts of things that you can't control, you know, whether you're well on the day, whether you make a mistake or not, which everybody, however hard they train, can do in a race or in a match. And so actually, you know, just look after things you can look after, and make sure you enjoy every day, because who knows what will happen on the end day. And I think that's where you love your sport, and actually you end up getting the best results that way as well.
So I want to think a little bit about the barriers that exist for women participating in sport. Have any of you faced any of these yourself? And if so, have you overcome them? Kelly, what do you think?
I think barriers are a lot less now than what they used to be. I think young players now in any sport, I think have got a massive opportunity and a lot of opportunities to be the best that they can be if they want to do it. Mm-hmm. I think that, like, especially from the generation where me and Farah are from, it was a case of, like, we'd have to get ourselves to training sometimes. Like, you were training at 8 o'clock at night, and you were getting home at 10 o'clock, you had school the next day, and some of the girls are facing that now, but it's realising actually some people might see it as a barrier because obviously you're getting home late, you've got school the next day, but for me it was an opportunity. I had an opportunity to do the one thing that I love doing. So when I speak about barriers, are they actually barriers, or are they obstacles that you either need to overcome to still be able to do what you're doing? Or is it a case of actually, yes, it's a barrier that you can't do something then, but you've still got the opportunity to do what you're doing? Like we gave an example earlier that, yes, we're moving across into the men's training ground, etc., but especially previous seasons, we wouldn't be able to go into the training ground until the men would finish, and that might be 2-3 o'clock. but where we normally train at 11 o'clock, 10, 11 o'clock, and you go in, well, some people would say that's a barrier, but I'm going, well, like that's an opportunity for us. Even though we've got to train later, we're still getting to do the one thing we love. We still manage to train and get what we need to get in for that session, but what an opportunity to go to the main training ground. And I think the barriers have definitely shifted in the number of years that the game's been going, and I think that's just come from how the women's game's developed. And I think you've seen that in all sports now, even netball. You're seeing obviously England on the world stage now winning gold medals. You're seeing obviously cricket now doing really well. So it's that I think I don't think there's any barriers now where someone's saying you can't do that or you can't do that. It might be, oh, you need to do this way, or you can only do this at a certain time. And for me, I look at it and go, well, I've still got the opportunity to do it, and I'll take that with both hands. And hopefully, if I do that, then I can be successful.
And Alice, you mentioned that funding is potentially varied. So what's your experience in terms of funding when you've been playing netball at Reading?
I wouldn't say in terms of being at Reading, there's been a funding issue, because across the board, the kind of sponsorship is a general thing. It's across all the club, it's dependent on their needs and the equipment that they need. It's tailored to them. But in terms of outside clubs, I mean, you need to get sponsorship in from somewhere. You need, someone's dad in a good business, or you need someone's, family, or it's got to come from somewhere. But I mean, at Reading, we're quite grateful for just that system in place. I think we take it for granted, because I know that a lot of people can't get funding, and that is a big issue of trying to get into the sport initially. As you were saying, getting to the games, getting to the, if you don't have parents and you don't have someone that can take you from a young age, then you kind of, it's off your own back.
And so what sort, you mentioned that you need to know somebody in order to get sponsorship. How can we change that? How can we make people care about women in sport enough to step up and sponsor?
I mean, I'd say it's a general, people need to be more aware and more interested in pioneering for women in sport, and I think it's got to start from an earlier age, and having people go through it with you, I think that'll help. It's got to probably come from the government, it's got to come from schemes, it's got to come from businesses that are willing to fund and to give money to help.
It's also having people behind it a lot more to drive it. So if I look at the women's game now and the women's Super League, for instance, it's now Barclays Women's Super League. So, but I know there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are literally like trying to, literally go out, get what they need to get, or go and seek different people to do that. I know even at Reading, for instance, we've got our first shirt sponsor as a women's, but that wouldn't have come from those guys trying to find something and searching every day for it and putting the hours in to do that. It's kind of across the board, even I suppose, especially at a more of an amateur level, to have those people, and sometimes it is volunteers. I know when I was younger, a lot of it was volunteers that I know was taking in the money that you were paying every week or every month or every season, to those that would go out and just speak to different people. And I just think you can do so much just obviously sitting in the rooms like this and saying about it, but I actually think it's having those people that want to do the work from behind the scenes to really push that as well.
Mm-hmm. And when we think about equality in sport, have there been positive changes in equality? Is there anything that you can draw on to make us feel positive and hopeful that things are changing?
There's definitely been some change, but there's definitely more to do, and the pace of change frustrates me the older I get more impatient with it. I think when you're in sport, you can always find a way of escaping. I think it's important that you find the people around you, the coaches, the volunteers, actually who can help you, and there is always a way to do it. But I'm impatient that our structures are sort of still dependent on people finding ways around things. Certainly the lottery has evened up the world of Olympic sport, where women's sports were completely underfunded, not the priority, had no chance of sponsorship. That definitely made a sea change in '97, and we've seen it now get to a point where it's basically 50-50 men and women winning medals, and that means that all women are getting that kind of sports science support, all of that, where they were kind of in the second tier. So I think that has really shifted things. I still think within quite a few of the sports there are lingering sort of cultural elements where there's more to do. Certainly female coaches, very few and far between in quite a lot of Olympic sports. England football team is sort of a very prominent example of that. Recent Six Nations rugby stuff that was in the papers about the girls not having a cold shower afterwards, and Guinness were asked if they wanted to sponsor women and said no thank you. And I'm not seeing them being held to account. I'm not seeing somebody going and saying, why did you say no? Everyone went, oh no, that's okay, we're not ready yet. I mean, why is that okay? Do you want to sponsor women? No, thanks, actually, not this year. To me, that's not on, and we shouldn't be comfortable with that. But, there's been a couple of articles, but now we've moved on. And meanwhile, women have still got cold showers. And so that makes me sort of cross, that why isn't that a problem? Why do we accept it and allow that to continue? So I think there's more to be done. There's a lot more to kind of break down within, once you sort of get past the surface changes that have happened. There's still, in the coaching world, we have a lot that we need to train and support women coaches, and also to make it possible for a much more flexible way to coach. So, in rowing, you have to spend all day and every weekend and, every 364 days of the year kind of thing coaching. And I actually think that isn't good for the male coaches, that it's in their families. It actually means that I think a lot of the coaches don't sort of step back and get that advantage of a fresh perspective. So I think the coaching world has got a long way to go, and it's starting to bring more women coaches through, but that's really slow for me. So, it's a mixed picture. Yes, access at some of the grassroots stuff, cricket doing a brilliant job, football obviously growing, Baroness Campbell at the FA, super good news for kind of women's football, but I'm impatient, there should be more.
And what do we think about the visibility of women in sport? Gareth, growing up, did you see sportswomen as visible role models, or do you think they were really lacking for you?
Yeah, they were, excuse me. They were definitely lacking in terms of football role models. I remember I used to love watching the Olympics. Denise Lewis was somebody that I thought was an amazing woman, and somebody that I love watching when it comes to Olympics. So I really was excited about watching the Olympics because that was the most visible sports for me as a female growing up. Apart from that, it was mainly male. I used to go and watch Chelsea every weekend. With little Dennis Wise running around the pitch, but and just because he was our captain, I think he was somebody that, as a kid, the armband, I guess we just see it as something that's amazing, don't we? We want to be the captain of the team. So I guess as a kid watching, he was Chelsea captain at the time, and somebody that, I looked up to, and somebody that modelled my game on a little bit when I didn't know nothing about football, but now I do and never have done that. There's no visible females that being certainly on football that I was aware of growing up.
And as earlier we were talking about the fact that if you want to find women in sport, in a particular sport that you're interested in, you have to proactively look for it.
Yeah, it's not given to you on a plate, and I know that's kind of is why I'm saying that. But netball's now on YouTube, which is fine, but it's not enough. It's not on one of the main channels. It's not readily available. You've got to know that they're on. It's not advertised really. I mean, more so now that social media is involved. But you've got to be in the know already to kind of be able to enjoy that. Whereas if you weren't and you wanted to discover something new, for example, then it would be much harder.
And a question for everyone: should we be expecting women's sport to be taken as seriously as men's?
I'll answer. I think, I don't know, I'm going to ask for, I think, what do we see as serious? Because that question, that when I read that we was going to be asked this question, I've took our sport serious since I started. And people that I've worked with and that have motivated me and that have pushed me and that have coached me, they've always took it serious. They've always done over and above what they can do in order for the facilities, whether we have facilities, timings, coaching, equipment, physio, always gone over and above.
Kath, what's your thoughts?
the fact that that question can even be asked, deeply depresses me. We're not in the right place, are we, where we're still debating that really. What's it all about? It's about human endeavour, it's about skill, it's about watching, people push themselves, enjoy themselves, have fun and come together. That doesn't seem to really do resemble to.
But I think we say serious, are we saying that because it's not on TV like the men, so we don't take it serious because there's no media interest as much as the men? That's when so we're creating it ourselves, aren't we, in terms of it not being taken seriously? I think if you ask any sports person, they would like to think that even at amateur, it's taken seriously. You try as much as you can, and that this is serious, this is what we want to do on a daily basis to get better.
So this is probably a good point to get some questions from the audience. We're going to talk about media later on, but please, if you have any questions about some of the things that we've talked about already, we'd love to hear them. Hands up, roving mics. There's one right at the back.
Kath mentions women's rugby and said ladies don't have cold showers. And they mentioned Guinness in the same sentence. Are you blaming Guinness for not being willing, or the RFU for not standing as one across both games?
All of them. So I think, and there's a responsibility for clubs to provide hot showers for women, as why wouldn't you? And having grown up in a world where I used to change in the car park because certain rowing clubs didn't have women's changing rooms or enough space. There's been a big sort of shift to make sure the basic facilities are there. And I think universities now, have been really good at shifting their facilities to make sure that men and women have equal vision and access. Hot showers is one manifestation of that, and Reading's certainly got a brilliant sports centre that does that. So I think there's facilities at club level. Then I think there's the responsibility of who sponsors the situations, who are they negotiating with. There's a whole establishment, isn't there, that I would like to guess is largely run by men. All of you I want to sponsor.
You mentioned the lack of female managers, female coaches. Do you think the coaches of national teams should only be female, so those jobs should be guaranteed for females?
No, there's no reason why it should be one rather than the other. So I absolutely don't have a problem with it, but it needs to go both ways. So I also think women should be able to coach a men's team, of course a man should be able to coach a women's team, but what we see is predominantly men coaching both. So it's about making sure that we've got a range of coaches, and just as in the business world, why do we want diversity? Because it gets better ideas and it gets much more better outcomes. It makes us much more able to sort of have different perspectives and more innovation. All of those. The same thing goes in sport. That actually we're missing out on having greater diversity in coaching teams within our sports, who will be able to then provide a kind of richer coaching experience, different perspectives on the skills of well-being, all the technical aspects. So, absolutely don't think you only have one to coach either.
So how do we get more women coaching? And there's lots of ladies here doing sport. Would you continue as coaches? Speaking, you've got two female coaches here, but we're doing it despite ourselves or despite everyone else. But how should we encourage more coaches, more female coaches?
Farah, would you continue as a coach in the future, do you think?
I was thinking there's a couple here coaching.
You coach already? There you go, there's your answer.
Yeah, coaching is a path that I want to take after playing. I think I've got really good experiences in the game to try and. I was talking earlier about not failing them in terms of when they go. I feel like sometimes, especially when I grew up, going from grassroots or young adult football, you're not taught what it's like when you go into a senior environment where we speak about winning and winning being a priority and how it doesn't matter about anything else other than results. But also with that, there's a roller coaster of being a substitution, losing games, being at fault for whatever happened. So you've got. I feel like I've had those experiences. I've been through them. I've been able to deal with them. But kids aren't exposed to those experiences, so I can give a little bit back, and I try and put them in those vulnerable areas as a youngster, so they can overcome it young. So when they go into senior football, they're actually in a better position to deal with it. So when we talk about mental health, I feel like, there's so many people that probably didn't get exposed to those things when they were young, and they come to see it in football now, and all of a sudden we've had an explosion of mental health, whether it be anxiety, depression, whatever, through sport, through the pressures of sport. And I think that if we can not toughen them up, probably, or make them a little bit more resilient to things, or expose them to different situations, it might help them in the senior part of their career of football, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I love coaching the kids. I'm a bit harsh if you ask them, they'll probably tell you. But it's certainly for me, I don't. When we're coaching, in that 2 hours that I have with them, 4 hours in total a week, I like to make sure I can give them as much as I can. And I muck around with them before and after, and because I don't really take life too seriously. But certainly when it comes to coaching, I put it on and make sure they know that we've got to work. There's times when we can work and there's times when we can't. But when we're working, I'd like to think I'm making fun if I can. I certainly enjoy it. I don't know if they do, but then I do it every day and I just enjoy playing. So ask him, I don't know. But say about things.
Like even what you say about opportunities for female coaches, and is it a case of, I don't know, because obviously I've been doing this for many years now, but is it, I was someone that would go and put myself out there a lot of the time, and whether that was to go and volunteer alongside another coach, to learn, whether that was, and then hopefully something out of that would come. Obviously getting through my badges was one thing that, especially on the FA side, there's a lot of tick boxes that you have to go through. But is it a case of there's not opportunities, or we're not waiting for opportunities to land in our lap? It's a case of, are we doing everything we can to go and find those opportunities? Like I said, I don't know. But I knew that I started coaching at the age of 16 because I just love playing, so I just assumed that that's what I wanted to do when I alongside playing. So I started coaching, but for part of my time it was I'd go and work alongside this coach, and to get to probably where I am now, and obviously get a job off the back of that as well.
Yeah, so you talk about, I guess we just assume that if you play sport or you're in a sport that you want to go on to coach and give back, but I know so many female footballers that can't stand the thought of coaching, can't stand the thought of being coached. And so for that career, the 10, 15 year career that they had being a coach, it's too much. It's staying in the game, and the sacrifices you have to give in sport anyway, we choose to give them. So we choose to give them. They probably, at that time in their life, they choose not to give up those sacrifices, and they want to move on and have a different journey within their life. So I think the opportunity to coach, certainly in football, is there, and it's very heavily supported by the FA in terms of the England players anyway. They fund you and they're going to put you on those courses, but some players just don't want to do it.
That was a great question, thank you. There's a question over here, I think.
Have any of you ever had any experience with someone not believing in you? And if so, how did you deal with it, and what did you do about it?
That's a good sign that they have to think.
I definitely have.
Have you?
Yeah. I would say I've had experience of others not believing in me, and I've had experience of myself not believing in me. And it takes some time, and I think it's a good process to be. It's a process of thinking that through, thinking, am I going to let that person define me? And for a while, well, they know more than me, they must be right. That kind of battle. At the time it felt kind of hard, but when I look back on it, actually that built belief by going, maybe they're right. Well, how do I know? Well, maybe I'll test it and see, and really seeing it as a sort of a test, a challenge, and having just an ongoing dialogue. So I certainly didn't completely accept it, but certainly, it rocked me. And then led to myself, questioning things. But I think there are always other people around. So, as much as there's someone who doesn't believe in you, I think there's always somebody around who does. And I think it actually then comes back to, well, am I dependent on somebody else defining belief, or do I need to have belief in myself? And so what it highlighted for me was, hang on, why am I needing their approval? And what's going on there, and actually that's the bit I need to build on. I need a lot of help with that as well. I need to sort of talk that through with my coach. And I need to, think about how I'm defining success. So again, it's that, people telling me you'll never win, that sort of thing. And then thinking, well actually, maybe if I really love this sport and I just see how far I can get, then let's just go on that journey and then we'll see what happens at the end of the day. So again, it's kind of linked up a bit with that, what are we basing the belief on, and what's our definition of success, and whether actually loving your sport and just seeing what's possible is perhaps a kind of better approach.
I think that's the biggest thing, is like not letting that person define who you are, and I think it's a case of obviously, like, especially for myself, I was always someone that if there was that person around, it would be like, okay, what more can I do? What is that I need to go and get in the gym? Is that I need to go and do extra somewhere else? And because there will always be someone that will value you, and the work that you might have put in to be even better than what you are now. And like you said, I think the biggest thing is don't let that define you. Don't let that. And it's hard because, and that's the biggest thing. Everybody has an opinion on something. Some will say that wall's cream. Some will say that wall's white. And that will be exactly the same in life, whether you're in work, whether you're in football, whether you're in sport. Like, some will say that Farah's good at football, some will say that she's rubbish. But it comes down to opinions, and I suppose if there is that one person, it's just their opinion at that time. And I think it's important that you believe in yourself and try and be the best that you can be as a person in the sport that you're in. Because there will be someone that has that opinion of you, that think that you're great, that you're invaluable into the team, and it's just a case of keep working hard and pushing through that, because, like I said, the world is full of opinions. It really is, and don't let that opinion define you.
I don't think many people will call most capped football player rubbish. There's an answer. Okay, Roger.
Okay, so it's great this event's happening today, because this morning in the news we heard that in the new cricket series, the 100, the female teams or the female players are going to be paid the same as the male players. So, which is a sort of breakthrough, I think. So my question is that what you would want to achieve? Because I'm going to go out on a limb here. I hope I get out alive. I think more people will attend in person or on television the men's matches than the women's matches. So is it important for you as professional female sports players to be earning the same as men, or to be followed and looked up to as much as the male equivalents?
I'd actually cross the pay gap question off my question list, because I thought that's too controversial. Well, we've got it now, so we have to.
That's assuming
I'm a visitor.
There's an assumption in your question that the two aren't linked, that being looked up to isn't related to the pay. And I think as an athlete, you're rarely motivated purely by pay. Certainly in women's sport it's rare because it doesn't exist. Yeah. And it'd be interesting to see what, but for me it's what's the message that's coming from society, from the people paying it, from the national governing body. If they're not valuing women the same, then I've got a problem with that.
I think it's different at national level, because that is funding that's coming from, if you like, not having necessarily have to make that money and be a business to thrive, but especially in club level, I look at it and go, for us to be paid the equivalent of what the males are being paid at Reading, I don't think we're anywhere near that right now. I think for them as a business and what they bring in to run their business and to be able to pay those players, I know for us as an entity, we don't do that. So we don't bring in that money to be able to put players on £100,000 a week. I'd love to think that we could get there. I really do. In the short term, I don't think we'll ever get there.
There's something about the history of, when the FA kind of stopped, I forget what the dates are now, for sort of 50 years, basically, kind of women's football. There's a sort of you know, we can't change, we can't ever turn 50 years in a year. But how much responsibility do we take for the fact that we held back the development of a lot of women's sports? And so whilst you might say, okay, the gate isn't going to justify it in the next year, I think we have to look broader than that at how we've treated women's sport over a century. And with that perspective, then maybe it's not just as simple as how many people are turning up in 1 year, next year's season. Actually, let's think about what we want to get to in 10 years, in 20 years, or even balancing out that century.
Do you not think that's the problem though? Because every question you get asked about equality is about money. It's about, do you want to be paid the same as the men? No. Because I don't think our game's at that stage where equal pay between male football and female football is equal. Men's football is the biggest sport in England. No one can compete with that. So trying to compete women's football with that, what I think equality is in sport, in terms of facilities, in terms of showers that are equally as hot as the men's and all these things, we need to get down to the foundation of it. What is equal? What do the men get equal? The diet nutritionists, physios, gym facilities, good coaching, good qualified coaching at the levels through, and then build there. Money should come really last for me, but that's the first question that people compare in women's football. And for me, it's just, I don't know where it is. For me, I don't really care about that. And as you said, money's not motivation. While money becomes our motivation, our success becomes less.
But it's more about what it represents.
But yeah, of course, I think we should be paid.
An establishment,
Of course, but I mean,
building what it is.
200 grand a week, I mean, it's silly money anyway, in any walk of life. So, for me, I'm on a decent enough salary that I would be if I was to work as a normal, I'm saying if I work, if I work in, I don't know, a supermarket as a postwoman or whatever, I don't know, a supermarket. You're on a salary that you can live by, and that's what football now, female football, gives me. I can live on my salary. So before, when I couldn't, then the question was, well, when is it going to be equal enough so we can be professional, so our sole focus is to train and be paid and live comfortably? I don't know, I just think there's so many things missing before we talk about pay that aren't equal, but we jump to pay.
So earlier on we were talking about how football in the US is completely the other way around, where I think women lead and there's more interest in the women's game. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, just like we're always, obviously from a female point of view in football, we're always competing with the men, which like Farah alluded to, it is the #1 sport in the country, and that's where maybe right or wrong, it's where sponsorships put their money, it's where media people put their money, but is that because at the moment they're going to be making something back from that? And I suppose it only takes someone, if they want to jump in the deep end with women in sport or for football, to kind of go, okay, I'm going to put all this money in. And it's like the football club at the minute. Like they pay everything. So whether that is they're paying players' wages for the women's, they're paying for facilities for every single girl in the club to train at, to play at, paying the coaches. Like for us, they pay everything, but at the moment, we don't bring anything into the club, or definitely nowhere near, to cover those costs. So the support that they give us is massive, is huge. And every year that's grown. Every year, females' wages, if we're going to talk about money, has got better and better and better. And I know that's only going to grow. But I agree with Farah. I think there's more smaller issues right now to give people the right, even at that age. Like, are they getting the equivalent to the boys right now? At our club, I'd like to think so. That the facilities, they get the same, the coaches, they get the same, the opportunities are the same.
Time-wise, even so, the academy boys 4 times a week, they're in twice.
Yeah.
So really, their development is so far behind the boys at that age. So in terms of when they come to senior football, they've had 4 hours of coaching a week.
Yeah.
I mean, I get school stuff and other stuff that they'll do. But in terms of professional coaching, the academy will do 4 or 5 times a week with boys at the same age.
Yeah.
So again, is there an opportunity that's where we start there, so that our senior football then becomes better because they've had 4 days of coaching, and you know, I know that they part school, they don't let the boys. We don't part school our female players.
No.
So they get education alongside their development players. So we don't have that. So what I'm talking about, you talk about money, let's invest there. Like, get all this right first before we talk about our senior players being paid the same as the men.
The thing is it related though? You know, so actually, you know, sometimes I think we slow it down because we'll just do this bit and do that bit, and I'm sort of a bit impatient, I suppose, but I'm thinking, hang on, maybe we should be doing, you know, making bigger change. I mean, it is interesting, football is kind of a different case because the money for men is so extreme and no other sport kind of is like that. So the equality feels different, it feels really uncomfortable.
It's the same thing. I went to the Olympics in 2012 and had the opportunity to go into the village, and how the Olympics live compared to the football. I'm saying football because it was never for England in the Olympics. How they live and go about their business just as normal people, it's totally different to what, I mean, the men stayed in the hotel, they didn't go into the village, they didn't do anything. They didn't act like normal people, normal human beings. They didn't want to be around people. They weren't humble about what they did. So it is a completely different kettle of fish that you're working with and you're working against. So why we ever keep comparing it? It's just we're gonna have these, I'm going to say stupid things all the time about it.
It's an outlier, isn't it? Because I think we are, like in the Olympic sports, we absolutely have the same lottery fund.
And that's how I felt when I was there. And that's how I felt when I spoke to Olympians.
And I think it's a great, you know, I think it makes it feel a healthier environment
That's my point.
Yeah.
It was so much more. If you ask any of the girls, they loved it.
Yeah.
That was the best environment to be in. You know, you sit at dinner with every other nation that competed in the Olympics. That's not even heard of in international football. And whether that's women or men, you're separate hotels, you're away, you can't be seen to be training. It's crazy, they were training on the park, running up and down on concrete. It's completely different. So for women's football, when you compare it to pay, I mean, it's different to what I'm saying, I believe other sports.
So I knew this would be controversial. I'm interested to know what do the audience think about this question about pay, differences in pay in football and
You start the war.
Well done. Get lower and lower in the chair.
Come on. So I am a bit of a sports fan. And one of the most exciting sports events that I've seen on television in the last few years, apart from the Women's Football World Cup,
Thank you.
was the final of the World Netball Championship between New Zealand and Australia. And I think, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So it was last year.
Yeah.
And I think, for an example of a sporting event played at the highest level by two super athletic groups of individuals, highly skilled, highly motivated, really going for it. That was a real proper sporting contest.
I'm loving Alice's face here. Alice Netball.
And I think that's an example of actually what can be achieved if everything is in place, because in Australia, where almost all of the members of both of those teams play, they have a fully professional women's, proper women's netball.
Yeah.
And that's what it actually is. And it's like, I mean, you mentioned the American women's football team. You know, they're very good because they actually have a proper professional league that's done properly.
And their college system, in terms of football and soccer, in their college system, it's bigger than our sport here.
They had line, and that's one of the things that's revolutionised sport in America. Whenever it was at the 70s, sort of when they brought in a rule that said you basically got to have equal funding in the colleges into men and women, and that transformed sport. You know, women's rowing has massively gained, women's football massively, you know, and that's decades now. That means they've got a system that it's really hard for us to compete with. And I think
That's going back to the foundations again, isn't it? Like having an equal money to get into.
As a governmental, that's at that level, it's society saying it's going to be equal, and we still don't have that assumption. It's still left up to rich individuals or organisations to decide that, if you like, in some sport.
The Women's Super League wouldn't have become professional if the FA didn't start by putting money into it. So the FA still put money, the FA still give every single club in the WSL and the Championship funding to part fund some of, to run. Yes, you've got to match that, but also for those that want to go above and beyond and want to win leagues, etc., they know that they've got to put in more money, etc. But it only started by our association putting the money in to hope that then people would jump on board, and it's worked. Like I said, we've got Barclays on board now. We've just sold a TV deal in the US, so they can watch it over there. So it's taken, nearly 9 years, 8-9 years to get to that point. And like you're saying, we're trying to change things. You're impatient with it at times, but it's going to take patience for it to change, and hope that, and is it for netball that the Association of Netball got to try and put funding into it at that level to create those professional leagues, and to have that money to be able to do. I'm not saying that the money they give us would be able to run on, but they make you put foundations in place by using that money to then build on.
There was actually a news statement today which I just saw flash up, and it saw it saying that I think more netball's being shown. Maybe that was the cricket as well. I mean, I literally there were 2 or 3 things that Sky Sports were saying. We're upping coverage of women's sports. So again, it sort of moves slowly. But I guess when they did Title 9, it was game changer. It was from now on, and sometimes I wish we could sort of shift it a bit quicker.
On the other hand, the media has been accused of failing sportswomen because of the way that they're portrayed. What do you think about that, Alice?
Yeah, I think sport has historically been male-oriented, and I think the sport and masculinity, the notions that come with that, strong, competitive, driven, it's not seen to be attached to females. And I think that's probably where it does fail women's sport. I mean, social media now is excellent in that it can lift women and advertise, and just as tonight's kind of done, a lot of people are here from sharing and whatnot. That's kind of how I think it is on that bottom up process of. I mean, I haven't experienced any kind of negative, but I know that negative impacts from social media. I know that I'm speaking from a privileged position, at uni, and it's not really that kind of way. I don't know if you've experienced it differently.
Don't tweet.
Just don't get social media.
But I know there is, there is a lot of backlash for women in general, rather than just in sport. Politicians and all of that. They've got to become accountable, I think.
And that's the thing, like social media can be such a great place, but it can be such a horrible place.
Yes.
That's maybe it's just from the era that we are, but like literally I'm not someone to publicise my social life, my personal life, anything like that really on social media, or thoughts about games, etc. like that, because I know 9 times out of 10 what's going to come back, and maybe that's different for me now because I'm in a different limelight, but I remember when I gave birth to Harley, my little girl was 3 now, but I came back to work after 2 weeks, and literally the media that was just horrible at the time. It was one of those, like, just needed to shut it down and switch off from it, because yes, I know I've just had a daughter, she's 2 weeks old and should be at home with her, but I've also got a professional career that we're in the middle of the season, and I've got a job to do to be successful, but she's part of that. She is part of that, and that's why and social media is, I know we're changing the subject now, is my biggest worry and fear for the younger generation, because and it's not just female, like it's not just females in sport. I just think it can affect people's lives now drastically. Just from people's opinions, and that's why it was crucial. From what I believe, what I said earlier is don't let people's opinions, because someone, like I said, someone will say A and someone will say B, and it's what the information you want to take on board and what drives you.
Well, we call out, don't we? We call out more media. We want so much more media coverage in our game. Females don't get enough coverage. I just think of the next teammate of mine, Alex Scott, when she played football for Arsenal England, in terms of opinions of her as a footballer in the media, there was nothing. She's now one of the most recognised female pundits now from our game that's coming to the men's game talking about men's football. And she's recently come out with having been retired, I think now 2 years now she's retired, mental health, depression, anxiety, all of these things based on criticism within the media. So we're crying out for that, but we've also got to be careful with that because it's, I don't know, I mean, as I said to you, I don't really get it because I don't really get negative feedback because I don't really read into it. I don't really put much out with Twitter. I probably get asked to retweet again just to try and get some fans in. I have opinions on things, but I know if you jump on an opinion of something, you're creating something, so you're asking for a debate and maybe things that you don't like to hear or read, so I don't do it. So just, type what you want and don't mind coming back at. But you can't for the media to give you so much, but then actually when you're in it, you can't deal with it, you don't know how to deal with it. And that's basically what's happened with a few of our female footballers that now jump from professional playing to punditry. Horrible, struggling, really bad.
So how do we try to use the media in a more positive way in sport?
I think sort of one, I think we've got, again, I sort of feel we sit and allow and accept a kind of really, quite abusive media, don't we? And again, it was certainly, if you've got female politicians, horrified, who would ever want to become a politician, female politician particularly, although, everyone gets it to some extent. I think sort of one really positive piece has been the Telegraph, which has set up a women's sport section run by Anna Kessel, who's a bit of a kind of brilliant sort of warrior for women's sport. And, Dean Asher-Smith writes for it. They've had a great range of articles. It's, and it's about real life women's sport. It's about competition. It's also about, training, sports science, dealing with periods, it's just got everything. So even though I might not read the rest of the newspaper, I think that's, it's also not quantifiable, so everybody can access it. So for me, that's a little beacon of something that is shaping, the media, because the media will always be there. So I think, whilst we should definitely control, how much we engage with it, particularly when you're competing and you're kind of vulnerable, I also think we need to shape it to be better. We've got more scope with the different channels of media, in theory, to get other stories out there and other pictures of what women's sport's about, which is really important for the younger generations. And I think that sort of investment decision is a really positive one that for me is generating lots of great stories about women athletes who are real, who sweat, who have highs and lows. And that for me shows, okay, it's possible that we can get some other stories out there that I think is really useful to balance up the picture that we're getting.
I just feel with the media, we crave it so much, we put ourselves in, especially in women's game, in women's football. We crave it so much, we put players at risk and put in really vulnerable positions in terms of what they're exposed to with them. And I don't know, I just don't agree with some of it and the way we're exposed to it. If you talk about comparing men and women, you certainly can't get the access that the media get to female footballers in terms of training, in terms of match day, etc., as the men get. I'm everyone who's trying to get media on board, and in the warm-up, and you're putting people out on warm-up players because you want media attention, because you're craving it that much. They've got a game to play. You would never do that in men's football. So these are things that I'm talking about. You talk about equal and trying to get equal television. You don't see anybody in a male game during a warm-up talking to the media, which is what they tried to do in the female game really early on when they tried to do the media in. It's infuriating. And I'm like, I don't want to have them. Players now, I see, they crave fame. They want to be famous. They see any article or anything they can do with their TV, they're going to be famous from. And they don't realise what comes with that as well. They're not trained to see what comes with it. We don't get any advice in terms of in our sport to say how to deal with the media or if you're approached in this way. We're just thrown out there, go on, there you go, you can get a bit of TV or you can get a bit.
I mean, that's where I think there's probably a bigger, it's almost part of health and safety and welfare and safeguarding and all of that actually is to help people, to help athletes managing the kind of media side of it more. And actually that's, probably really tough for coaches who, brilliant technical coaches are now actually, they need to help the athletes to sort of manage all that. And I think that's sort of where the role of the coach and the responsibility is probably expanding, but it's an important area where you need that sort of support network, not just the coach, but the support staff, if you like, to kind of help the competing athletes certainly to sort of step back from it and to be the front line in some cases and to say, no, that's not appropriate with training. To get that kind of priority, get the priorities right.
So are there any advantages of being a woman in sport?
Yeah, you can go wherever you want without being stopped by anybody. Go to the supermarket and get my shopping. Absolutely wonderful.
Maybe gambling, can't afford
Can't gamble.
addiction, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's right.
Any other thoughts on it?
And I think in the cricket world there is, it is a much more equal footing now that you get sort of funding and support, whilst I think still there are structures to even up, your access into the sport is often much better. And it's a wonderful experience to, to do the same with footballers who came into that world between them in the village to be, having breakfast with the same boat walking past and, and being the football team and women's team, not them, and all of that sort of thing. So I think, that's absolutely, the access is there for women in the sport.
Definitely think now it's more accessible for the younger players. Like if I looked at and the opportunities that are there, the opportunities that I had and Farah back when we were younger were very limited. We were paying to play still a lot of the time, but like I said, you would turn up and it would be very basic. But again, it's the game's growing so that everybody else has had to grow with it. But I look at the opportunities now that young athletes have, especially in the women's game, to be at a professional club, to get professional coaching, that then growing up and you can go into a full-time environment. I just think that it's there, and I think if you want something that badly and you want to achieve something that badly, that individual, in my experience now, has no excuse.
And one final question before we go to the floor again. What advice would you give to some of these youngsters who are hoping for a career in football, Farah?
I don't know.
Sorry,
football,
in sports, right?
For me, as I mentioned, I just played it because I loved it. I never took it serious. I never thought about where it could take me. You talk about, did I listen to outside influences? I just have my own self-belief, I guess. I just think, just enjoy it, like as much as you can. Never stop trying to learn. I think if you ask Kel, I'm 36 now, and every day I'm on her and our coaches because I just want to learn. So they're two things that I've really throughout my career. I've tried to learn along the way as much as I can, ask as many questions so that I can learn with that. And literally I've enjoyed every club and game and training that I've done throughout my career, and even before I was a grassroots player or playing against day. I used to just love going out with the ball and play. So just enjoy it and try and learn as much as you can along the way.
Thank you. And as what advice would you give to youngsters who want to do sport?
Yeah, I'd say try your hand at anything you can. Particularly at university, you get kind of fresh start. You can start at any level. You can come in with the girls. We have a social league. You don't have to play competitively. As I said, I know that I'm coming from a background that I've always had sport ingrained in me. So I know that it will be more difficult. But just do it. If everything's in place, then you'll find something that you enjoy. The mental, the physical benefits of exercise as a whole is incredible. So often I could, some of the girls message and say, I don't want to come along training, not really feeling up to it. I'm like, come along, and then afterwards they're feeling a lot better. And sport does do that, whatever sport, whatever exercise you fancy doing. Be prepared to be knocked back a bit as well, I think that's another one. I remember kind of trialling out and thinking, God, this isn't, being knocked back, not getting in, and thinking, oh, I'm not going to carry on. And then actually it's such a bigger picture than that. You look at what else you gain from being part of a team or doing exercise in general, and it's a bigger picture than a medal or where you're in the league or your teammates are by you and you've got that camaraderie. It's nothing better really.
You talked earlier about the social side and the fact that your university experience wouldn't have been the same if you hadn't done that.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have been able to function at university without sport as a whole, just because of that mental release, I think. And the friendships that you gain brings in a whole different group of social interaction and university experience, I think, as well. Yeah.
Kelly, your advice?
To be fair, it's not too dissimilar to Farah's. I think the biggest thing is an enjoyment. Like, as soon as you stop enjoying something, you've got to stop. But I think it's also a case of trying to take the positives out of every situation, whether that's a knockback, whether that is, I don't know, like you could be on a bench one day, but what is it from every situation that you can learn and take from it? But like I said, the biggest thing is whenever you are in life or in the situation, if you are training, just enjoy it and just do your absolute best that you can and make sure that you're putting everything into it, because that's one thing that will go a long way in the future.
Oh, amazing answers. I totally loved all the answers. Yeah, it's about absolutely enjoying it, the learning, you learn so much through sport that helps you the rest of your life, with the highs and the lows that come, and the kind of relationships piece, definitely. What stays with you don't carry your medals and your trophies around with you, but your friendships are with you. And you have much deeper friendships in sport sometimes than you do in the workplace, because you have those discussions about how we're going to do this, and what's going wrong or what's working, and what's your motivation. And some of the work I do now, it's actually about helping people in the workplace to have effective conversations that in a sports team you wouldn't dream of going out to compete or to race without having those. And I love that side of it, of being, in a big team where you depended upon each other. You didn't like each other all the time, but you knew why you needed each other, and you knew why you were there. And that is such an amazing feeling, and it's absolutely worth it. And that will help you in everything else that you do.
Great answers. So more questions from the audience. Daisy, I think.
This is kind of similar, but by the time that young women arrive at university, we quite often find that because they've already had years of the pressure that society puts on women, and not seeing any women in sport in the media, for example, by the time they get to university, they genuinely believe, a lot of them, they just can't do it. And Kath, you mentioned you just didn't think you could do it. What would you recommend for coaches and leaders in sport to try and convince young women that they actually can, or at least that it's worth a try?
Yeah, it's about making sport really accessible, and you're right. We label people often at school. They're the sporty ones, they're the academic ones. I hate all of that because we all develop in lots of different ways, and one person will be better at one sport than another. So it's about getting out of that categorisation. It's about parents as well as sort of teachers just encouraging to try lots of different sports, and often there is such a great range of things that. You can try fencing and throwing and football. There's such a range. It's not just about the sports you do at school. So I think there's that messaging about having a go. It's that kind of approach. And when somebody doesn't want to come to a session, it's like, well, just come once. Just come for 20 minutes. Actually, what's the worst that can happen? Making it super accessible to try it. Not saying, oh, how good were you at school at sport, or how fast can you run, and we've got to really try and open it up much more. So I think that what else can we do that would we need to listen to people. What would it require for you to come? Often people want to bring a friend, So again, come and bring someone with you, and actually then that gets even more people into the sport. So there's something about that. Just give it a go with no expectations. And not putting a kind of pressure on what it looks like, what doesn't look like, to be successful.
Alice, did you find that there were people who came to sport only when they came to university and hadn't had experience of that before?
Yeah, we have a lot of people that turn up kind of in Freshers Week, that come along and say, I haven't done anything so far, can I sign up? So yeah, probably won't be trialling out, but we've got these systems in place, we've got these events in place that you can get involved in. Again, bring people along that you want to try out with and give it a whirl. Yeah.
Thank you. I think there was another question over here.
In several Olympic sports, men and women compete on equal terms. We see mixing in tennis and in hockey. Can the panel give their views on mixing in their particular sports?
Who's going to answer that
I
first?
mean, after we start that, as netball's not really played by men as well. I mean, there are mixed leagues, but it's kind of, it's a blessing and a curse, I think, with that, because yes, it is an all-female sport, predominantly, but therefore does it get the support and coverage that it needs because of that, because we don't have men involved as well? Probably not. I think it probably would take a bigger push, something like that. Yeah, that's kind of my answer on that. There's not necessarily mixing in netball as much.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it works in rowing. It doesn't. It happens in Paralympic rowing. Interestingly, we have mixed crews, and in at the club level, we have mixed eights. So I think we absolutely could have mixed eights at Olympic level. I think we may well have mixed eights at some point at Olympic level. As I say, it already exists in the Paralympic world, and I think, yeah, we've got swimming relays coming into this Olympics, haven't we? Triathlon relays. There's quite a few sports, so I think the Olympics are liking this idea and looking for more opportunity, and I can definitely see rowing. I mean, sadly, it'll probably be used also as a way of cutting rowing places, because they're always looking to cut sports down. To bring in the sort of new trendy ones, and so I think they may use it as that measure. But I think it would be a great. I think it'd be a fun thing to do. I think it'd be a great thing to do.
There's a question at the front here, I think.
I was just going to ask, and it relates back to when you're talking about having your daughter, whether there's a perception in society that women have to choose between top level sports and having a family. And I don't think that perception necessarily just comes from men. I think it's within women themselves. I wonder what the panel thought about the perception that women have to choose where men don't have to choose.
Good question, Kelly.
Yeah, I suppose I didn't really look at it until I had my child, and you kind of, I've always, I suppose before that, I've always thrown myself into football. I'd be there early mornings, going home late nights, and the one thing it has allowed me to do is manage my time more effectively. But especially at that time when it happened, I didn't realise that was the perception from the outside looking in. And at the time, there wasn't really any support for me. At that time, it was kind of like, okay, I'm just one to get on with it anyway. So I'm not someone that lets other things affect me. It did emotionally a little bit, because you start going, shall I be doing this? Shall I be at home? And I think the hardest thing for me is my partner's in the same industry. So it's not a case of he's in a 9-to-5 job and pick up from school. We have to juggle things, but she will always be my number one priority. If there's been times where I've had to drop things because she's been poorly, I've had to stay at home, and that's one thing the club are really supportive of is I am a mum at the end of the day, looking after a professional outfit, but when it comes to life, there's more important things than sport and football, and that's one thing that's probably made me realise. But especially from that moment, I don't think it is accepted from society at the moment, and it's kind of like, yeah, what support networks is there to support those that I know?
There's only one player that I am aware of in the female game at the top level, Katie Chapman, that had babies whilst playing and still competed after having it. In America, it's the norm. They have babies, they have nannies coming into camp with them, etc., and it's all funded by US, whatever. The FA didn't, I'm not sure, even in our contracts, we didn't have leave after pregnancy, so it wasn't in there. So, yeah, in terms of how the FA supported the female games and in salaries, I don't even think there was in our football contract. I'm not even sure if they are now. So in our football contract, if I want to have a baby, we don't get paid. It's not in our contract, too. Like, that's right. No, that's right. It's not.
Your normal maternity pay.
Not in. Is it in our contract now? I know in the FA one wasn't. In fact, Eniola, she was somebody that really fought for that in our game and said that this isn't right for females. They should be able to have the choice to have a baby whilst playing. And actually, she got that into the contract after having the contract for 5 years. So she fought really hard for that. But in terms of being supported, there wasn't any support. Katie Chapman, her husband supported her, so that's why she did it. She's the only female, right?
Yeah, and then
In our game, in England,
yeah,
in England, that has had babies and come back to play. Otherwise, the girls will wait till the end.
Even in teenagers, maybe they I can't be an Olympic this because I also want to have a family, but a man or a boy would never think I can't have children because I want to be
Of course.
You know, we do that.
Yeah.
But it also, I mean, that goes right across, doesn't it, in jobs as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, we need more role models. I think we need more Kellys, Emma Hayes at Chelsea,
Yeah.
sort of
Even
coaching
the
side.
Kenny Championship talks about experiences, especially for females in England, because the only other female England players that have done it have lived until the end of their career, 34, 35, retired to have kids. So there's 4 or 5 since playing have decided to start a family now because of.
And we've got a couple of athletics, haven't we? Alison Felix and oh God, I can't remember. I think someone which one really crazy hair. But they're actually on their 3rd Olympics or whatever, so they're actually still doing it towards the end of the career. I mean, what is it that's required for that to feel different across society? It just isn't, it's still we're heralding, there's an example here, or there's an example here. And actually that requires sort of both the government and the companies and the clubs to kind of shift. And I guess those are all organisations which probably don't always have, more than 30% women kind of on boards and the leadership level. I just think there's still a way to go to create more flexible ways of doing things. So I think coaching is particularly rigid, isn't it? And in some jobs they're seen as you've got to be present. We may experience over the next few weeks a sort of greater flexibility in our working lives, which might be a great kind of learning exercise. But for me, from a coaching perspective, from a rowing coaching perspective, I think we've got much more scope, and we could have. Why do you always have to have the same coach go on every camp with you? Why do you always have to have the same coach all the time? I think the coaches would benefit from working in kind of more of a team coaching way. In fact, that's something that's being explored almost as another marginal gain for coaches to be supporting each other and challenging each other more, rather than, he's in charge, but the athletes being challenged all the time. But just so that coaches learn maximally, get different perspectives in. And I think women certainly bring often, of course they do. I mean, each person with a different background brings a different perspective. So it's about then the expectation of what coaching looks like, or what an athlete's career looks like. Again, one of the sort of issues that UK sports are starting to think about is retention, because there's so much pressure that Olympians are doing, where they could do 3, they're doing 1, because it's just, so unbearable, if you like, or, had enough after 1, or they want to have a family, or they want to sort of have a year off, and it's no, you're in or you're out. And actually, but they're losing athletes they've invested in, whereas it's far better to keep them for 8 to 10 years, and maybe they do have a couple of years where they're not at the peak, but they're doing some other things. But actually, over a period of time, you get a whole career, and then you get them staying in the sport and coming back and running clubs or whatever it might be. So I think they're starting, of a shift in how we think about what a coach looks like or what an athlete looks like. But again, it's slow, isn't it?
I think that comes from, especially in my case, like I now have a support network of staff where if I'm not able to get there for whatever reason, I trust my staff.
More staff than players, really.
Yeah, that's really good, because you don't want to be dependent on one person, because you also might be ill as much as it's your daughter not. This sort of dependency on one person is really unhealthy in an organisation, as it is within a sort of sporting organisation or business organisation. So there's that kind of model of we've got one leader we depend on. That's not working for any of our organisations now. So again, we need to kind of have much more of a team set up where we're not dependent on one person.
Thank you. Any final questions? Yeah.
Listening to Kelly, so I was wondering, looking at the men's game, how long do you think it might be until we next see a woman holding the top position at clubs like Reading, say, so even Premier League Championship level?
Top position, do you mean as a CEO or do you mean as a first team manager?
Yeah, so not very director of football there, but these positions in the limelight.
Yeah, it's been tried. I think the more that the women's game develops, there might be opportunities. I think that, like, obviously with the women's game going professional now, obviously it's more in the limelight. It's being watched by male footballers, if you like. So they're actually seeing at the level, and it's until those perceptions change, especially of male footballers. And I do believe that it is. Even myself, I've been around the men's training ground today, been with the first team manager, spoke to the lads, like they all show interest, I know some of them have been to games, so I think the perception's changing. I think it's just a case of, one, a female being brave enough to chuck themselves into it. I think that's the biggest thing. Have you got what it really takes? Because, like, even speaking to the first team manager today, what he goes through compared to what I go through is nowhere near. I'm nowhere near what he goes through, like what he has to justify every time, etc., and the stuff that he has to deal with. But yeah, I just think there's, I suppose men.
Do you think there's a different type of education between men's football and female football, like women's football and men's football, in terms of understanding of it? Because culturally they're different. Culturally, the men's game is completely different to our game.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that you've only ever viewed the women's game, right? To just jump in with the men, like.
Yeah, and that's.
Do you know what I mean? You have to be educated in that area, like, and how that operates compared to our game. Like Phil never come into our game. He's never been involved in women's football. He's probably never watched a women's game until he got the job, right? So what I'm saying to you, did he need more education? Did he need more people that have been involved in the women's game and how women work? Because we've got completely different men, especially in sport periods. I don't think he. I know
it's something that he struggled with.
But it's like when we went away with England, we were saying we want to go for a coffee. We wanted to go and get tampons, but didn't want to ask him. But he was uncomfortable with that. It's true, and the girls were uncomfortable with asking as well because they really hadn't been in that environment.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that do we need to be educated, or is there some sort of workshop type thing now before we just jump into that and it just be like, whoa, this is too much.
But yeah, you're right. I think even the male culture is very, very banterish. I think it is, and
they're very how the banter is. I've been around some of them, even ex-pros, and they're too fast and harsh.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Females think they can banter, and we talk about women's football, and I listen and we go, oh, we're bantering today. Banter, we're being really nice to each other in terms of coaching how the men are. This is facts.
No.
They're holding. They cut each other's shoes off and then sit on the couch. So that's them thinking it's funny and banter, it's bullying. But they see it as banter.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between men and women. We wouldn't cope for a minute in an environment. So even going back to his question, can we put men and females together? Absolutely not.
Even on that comment, what other contact sport do you know that can't do together? It's all right to do netball together because it's not contact sport. It's all right to do rowing together because it's not contact sport. Like, we trained with under 18 boys on Wednesday. Yeah, the girls coach, but some of them are 16-year-olds. Like, we dropped down a few age groups because physically that's where we see ourselves, and even when we play them, like, they're so much faster than us. They just kick the ball and run and they're gone. Like, it is, I think, like I said, it would take, for a female to go into a male environment, they would, excuse the tongue, need a set of
so the first one will be under incredible scrutiny, unfair pressure, definitely.
And it shouldn't be, but it's what it is.
Yeah. But I always look at myself and think, I'd cope with it. I think I'd just end up.
Well, have you done it? Why haven't you done it?
Not doing it. But yeah, but again, the women's game hasn't developed enough in the professional to know. Like, I'm only 4 years into a professional job in the sport, whereas I speak to the first team manager today, and he's been in football for 40 years. Like, he's been in management for 20 years, but the game's been professional for that long. So it is an education part of it, and it would be a case, if that's something that I really, really, really wanted to do, I'd need to go and be in them environments daily. I'd need to go and volunteer and go, right, I finish at this time, I'm going, my day's off, I'm going in. I want to see what it's like, I want to really, and it's I suppose it would come down to actually who actually wants to do it. It's like sitting there and going, oh, it'd be nice to see someone there, but deep down, actually, who wants to do it?
I could easily carry this on for another hour,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, we're out of time. If you thought that was the most inspiring conversation about sport you've ever heard, please raise the roof for these amazing women. You've been a wonderful audience. What fantastic questions. Thank you for attending. We hope to see you again at the next event, which is our alumni lecture on Thursday the 12th of March. It's Dr. Lawrence Haddad, who's going to be looking at global nutrition and whether big businesses are heroes or villains. Thank you so much for coming. Good night.